Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live here in Victoria, British Columbia on this classic wooden motor cruiser along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty amazing cruising someday soon, which I'm really looking forward to. So, back from goofing off downtown over the holidays, what's next? Well, I can tell you the most immediate concern is some bad weather that's coming. A big blow is coming in this afternoon and overnight. Forecast says actually 40 to 60 knot winds here in Victoria, which will be quite something. You'll notice the boat that used to be ahead of me is gone. It's been sold. The fellow was moved off it, Kim, you remember? In fact, I'm moving up into that slip, which is great, but not today because of this big blow. So, time to improve the lines. Now, MV Geordie is currently set up in its sort of benevolent weather setup, and I'll explain that to you. Because these monks can only be boarded, well, comfortably on the swim grid at the stern, we set up both these boats generally fairly taut at the stern so you can step down and onto the swim grid in, which as a result leaves the bow swinging out quite a ways. Now, in heavy weather, that is not good because that much flex in the bow, in other words, a good blow bringing that in, puts a lot of strain on this line, this cleat, and these fenders here. The mechanical advantage against them is extreme. So this can only be done like this when you know the weather is going to be pretty calm. So, in preparation for the big storm coming tonight, I have bought more lines, some chafe protection, and better yet, a cleat. Two cleats, in fact. I'll tell you why. My port cleat has been missing since I can't even remember when. In other words, it's in a box somewhere down below. And this boat has never had a midship cleat of any sort, so setting up springs is not all that simple. Anyway, let's get to it and improve things just a bit. We've already just finished up tidying up MV Zephyrus's lines for this same storm. New lines, new chafe protection, and the most important thing, in my opinion, for these boats is a line from the opposite cleat. And that'll take the bulk of the strain once this blow starts. I'll tighten that up a bit because a short line has no stretch. Anyway, more on that in a few minutes. So here's what I'm talking about. We have a pretty serious system going on here in the Pacific, a big gyre that's been going for quite a while. And if we zoom in on Vancouver Island, this is the forecast for 1 o'clock today, which is in a couple of hours. If we move forward a couple of hours, we are experiencing this great shelter that we always have in here. That's Victoria, BC, where I am, and we're sheltered by the Olympic Mountains here on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington, which is wonderful, except it's going to catch up with us by 7 o'clock this evening. The wind is going to start to encroach upon us here, and a little later on we'll see more and more, and overnight we are going to have some pretty heavy weather here in Victoria, forecast up to as much as 40 to 50 knots sustained. Pretty windy, but it is part of a massive system that fortunately we're only getting a tiny corner of. This app is Windy, running on an iPad Pro. It's really lovely stuff. All right, two new lines, some chafe protection, one of my recently acquired new lines that hasn't been in use, thanks Lloyd, and yes, not very yachty, but two nice big 10-inch galvanized steel cleats. Now, again, these aren't very yachty, but they're incredibly cheap, and I don't want to be buying any more stainless cleats because I want to replace all the stainless on the boat with bronze. So these will do until I can find some bronze in a similar pattern. Interestingly enough, 2 3/8 inches seems to be a standard because the new stainless cleats, my old cleats, and the holes on the boat are this same pattern. Let's toss one in. As I said, amazingly, these two holes, 2 3/8 apart. So some nice big galvanized bolts. Again, not yachty, dirt cheap. Now, here's something interesting about these particular bolts. I'm not sure what they were expecting in here for a head. These often have a hex cast in them for the bolt to go right in. 3/8 bolt doesn't actually quite go in, but it'll sort of bite. So I'm assuming I can kind of just tap these in. Yes, I can, and they'll bite quite nicely. Not ideal chafe protection across the top, but we'll cope with that. Okay, so, and down we go. So that's just to confirm that that's all right. I'm gonna pull this back out and put a little butyl tape under here. Okay, here we go. This particular roll is actually the one with the strip down the middle, so I have to end up actually just peeling bits off the side. I won't show you too much of this, but there we go. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Now some of you will say, Peter, this has been exposed to the weather for years. Why are you bothering bedding these at all? Well, because I'm trying to be a little more responsible. Okay, some big washers and some nuts underneath, and this is complete. Ugh. Excellent. You know, there's a certain utilitarian look and simplicity about galvanized. In fact, maybe it harkens to my Land Rover interest, but you know, I don't really mind that at all. Just as a note, I consider using carriage bolts up here, which would have a smoother head, but actually the way it all configured, it would have been much worse. Anyway, it just didn't work out. This is going to be just fine. Lines shouldn't be up there anyway. Okay, now for the midship cleat, this is a little more complicated. In fact, it's something I've been giving a lot of thought for, well, forever. I want to be able to have access to a cleat from the helm. In other words, when that window was open and I'm driving right there, I would love to have it right there. But the way the combing does this wonderful deck height change here, which is so beautiful and interesting, it's not really that suitable. It's just not enough structure, and besides that, just looks god-awful to put it right there. It really needs to be in the deck, which is 2 inches of solid timber. However, I can't put it this far forward because I really can't run a line over that like that. So it has to be about here, and I'm still going to have to make a bit of a, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about protecting the wood here, chafe protection. Now I have a pretty interesting idea for this, which involves some bronze, but we'll get into that later. So I believe the cleat is going to sit basically right in about there. Now, got to go inside and make sure that that makes sense. Happily right now, it's very easy access to the inside. Yeah. And here we go. So I have easy access to this cleat from the helm. Easy, easy, easy. I can manage stuff here. I can tie up. The neat thing about this boat is I can actually reach out and tie right onto the dock right from the helm. So I'm pleased with that location. I think it's great. Let's see if I have clearance below. This deck fill gives me a good idea where that would be. Very good access below. Let's drill some holes. Oh, that wind is starting to pick up. One bolt in to key it in place. Make sure I'm perfectly straight. I'm drilling through fiberglass, 3/4 inch of plywood, and 1.5 inches of what I believe is Douglas fir. Splendid. Let's get our butyl tape on here. Okay, butyl tape on. You know, I like that. And once you pound these bolts in far enough, they're actually below the surface of it. It's actually quite neat. All right, let's go downstairs and tighten that up. Okay, with new cleats on, let's get some new lines on. I won't take you through all of this. I'll do a little check-in after we're all set. Yeah. I will show you what I'm using for anti-chafe. Basically, this is like a fire hose material. My local chandler proposed this, and I think it's actually a great solution. So I'll set that up pretty straightforward. I'm cutting them into 1 foot sections, roughly 1 foot sections. There we go. And just kind of open them up a bit so they'll slide over the line. Nice new lines, along with the nice new lines I was just gifted. Braid is not the best rope to push. Okay. let's review what we got going here. Forward, 2 lines. One on the main cleat, but I'm not sure I trust it. So one is around the windlass with a little bit of chafe management on it. Now the cleat one is tighter, so there won't be much load on the windlass one unless it fails. So that's a backup. Again, principal concern is from the bow because this is where the wind is going to come from. Okay, so now we're set up with a spring. I use my worst lines, as you can see, for springs. Because of course they just keep the boat from jostling around too much, but they're not the lines that save you if you're really in trouble. But I'm really pleased to have them. And then further aft, as you may have seen me install, the line from the far side. Now again, I touched on why I do that. You want a really long line when you're in heavy weather because that's what gives you the stretch to ease the tension on both the cleat, the boat, and the dock and the general forces involved. This short line here is completely not suitable for heavy weather. I've got it on, but right now it is really slack. It's basically acting as an emergency. It does mean I have to step a little further to get aboard, but I can cope with that in the meantime. So all set up, really very pleased, and MV Zephyrus is set up pretty much the same way. I used one of my really sketchy lines to finish up her springs. So we're set, we're ready, bring it on. All right, starting to get windy. Another problem we have in weather like this is big logs coming in. You can see them out there. And I like to keep on top of it, make sure they don't get pinned in here. One advantage of having the boat a little looser is sometimes they'll pass right through, but if they don't wake me in the night, I hate to think of them pounding away in there. I doubt you can even hear me. Okay. All right, so we're checking the lines here. The central core is still mostly there, but the good thing about that is that the bow lines don't have to do that much work. And here we go, finally time to get back to some actual work. Well, today I'm going to stain the sole in the Wheelhouse, and I am going to stain it even though it's not the final sole, just because I find it a bit plywoody looking. So I'm going to stain it with some relatively consumer Minwax Gunstock is the stain I'm using. I've done a little color test, which I can't find for you now. Anyway, you're all going to see it in a few seconds. What I'm having to do is get some heaters going, which are my main heat in here, and dry a tiny few little drips because it's been pouring rain mostly this week, although it's not raining right now. So if I can get this stain on here and look after the drips for the next bit, we should be in good shape. Now, a couple of compromises. If you were following along, you knew I couldn't put this panel in because of some plumbing. I'm just gonna cut the plumbing. I'm good at fixing plumbing. Let's get this done. Yeah, and on top of that, I may flip this center panel over to see if the other side of it has a finer grain. That's quite organic and beautiful, but actually I prefer the more uniform grain look. Anyway, can I give you a tour of my new slip? Look where I am. I'm right at the very end now because, as you may know, my friend Kim, who used to occupy this spot, has sold his boat and moved ashore. So it's pretty awesome view. That's downtown Victoria right there. I'm loving it. Okay, let's actually get some work done. Okay, so let's see if the other side of this is significantly nicer. What do we think? Yeah. There. Over. You know, I should have known. Some of you are aware that this timber was on an angle, so flipping it over doesn't work. That's why it didn't. Peter. Let's undo that. Sad mistake. Hello, old bilge. It's not that that's ugly. First things first, very light sanding. All right. Okay, let's get some dust out of here. Right then, I've let the dust settle a bit. I've had the windows open this time, trying to let all the dust out. I'm gonna close up, trying to get it warm in here. I think I'm geared up with what I need. I'm gonna set you folks down on the helm here and watch this as a time lapse. Of course, I will paint myself, or in this case, stain myself into a corner. Happily, I have an exit. However, to recover the camera up here, I will just have to reach in the window and get it later. I've done some pretty big floor stain jobs in my life, usually with some very skilled assistants. But it's always a little daunting getting started because, of course, you do need to leave a wet edge. So I'm going to basically work my way back, creating a wet, wiping back. You're going to watch the whole thing. Sorry. Well, the camera battery died before I could finish, but I'm pleased with that. All big staining jobs get just sort of miserable near the end. Your hair's in your eyes. Well, mine is anyway. But on the whole, I'm very, very pleased with that. I think that'll do. If it's dry enough tomorrow, which I kind of doubt, I'm going to get some Varathane on. Yeah, it's not a real marine varnish, but that would cost a fortune in the real thing, and Varathane will be just fine. Okay, so many of the questions posed in last week's episode was about water in the bilge. And yes, there's water in the bilge, and many people were concerned about that. Now, in a wooden boat, a certain degree of water in the bilge, I'm not saying every wooden boat has it, but mine does and many do. Effectively, wooden boats are constantly sinking, slowly. So we rely on bilge pumps to pump it back out again. Now, many of you wooden boat enthusiasts will say, Peter, that doesn't have to be the case. My bilges are dry as a bone. Well, mine aren't. I have a chronic leak at the chine seam on the port side right at the stern. I thought I dealt with it the last haul out, and I didn't. So the boat leaks. Well, the pump goes off about every 45 minutes, and it pumps out about a cup and a half. In terms of the water that you saw in the bilge down here while I was working down there, isn't that gorgeous? There's no engine in the boat right now, or fuel tanks, or batteries, or anything really very heavy other than me. So the boat is sitting quite high in the bow. Normally, the water flows forward because the boat is deepest in the water at the bow. So all that water travels through limber holes forward and is pumped out by the bilge pump, which is actually in the forecastle. But with the boat sitting so low in the stern right now, you're getting a lot more puddling, shall we call it, down through the middle. Anyway, it's not of a concern to me. If it's a concern for you, I apologize. At this haul out, I'm going to have a stab at vastly improving it. Whether it'll be a lot better or not, I don't know. We sure made MV Zephyrus a lot drier over the last little while. Now, on that, you might say, Peter, okay, your boat's leaking, it's sinking, you're relying on your bilge pump to keep you afloat. Well, that's true. Well, I live aboard, so I can keep a pretty close ear on it. It runs about every 45 minutes. If it ran more often, I'd be anxious. If it stopped running, I'd be really anxious. So let's say I go downtown for a week and a half to enjoy Christmas at the Empress. Okay, then you might say, well, aren't you a bit anxious about that? Well, no, I'm not, because I installed this really spiffy app on my iPhone called Presence. Now, I'm not pitching this app in any way. It just happens to be really cool. So what it does is it connects to another iDevice, another iPhone. In this case, I put an old iPhone down in my bilge, and I put the great big shop light on down there. So it was constantly acting as a webcam. And as you can see, it sent me a video every 45 minutes every time the bilge pump went off and showed me it pumping out the bilge. Come on! Pretty cool, eh? So not only am I pretty sure the boat is not sinking, I can keep tabs on how often the pump actually pumps because it sends a video anytime it detects motion. Anyway, it was super slick. It's just one of those cool technologies I'm not paying all that much attention to, and when it catches up with me, I'm super impressed. Well, hello there, and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week. I'm telling you, it is so satisfying to have a soul again. I'm gonna say floor, just because this is my home and I can waltz around. Anyway, you've seen it. Let's get straight to the beer. I bought this beer because the label is on upside down, and I just couldn't resist. However, I have not really read it yet. Stone Zokoveza Imperial Stout. Perfect. Inspired by Mexican hot chocolate. Okay, well, but the label's upside down. It's so cool. Let's get going here. What have I got? I have misplaced my bottle. Well, here we go. Will this do? Yes, happily. Okay, so I've also misplaced any reasonable sized glasses, so I'm gonna have to go with one of my tall skinnies, probably a few pours. Well, you never know, I may not actually have many glasses of this. Okay, I like a stout. Well, I like Guinness. Other stouts tend to leave me underwhelmed. Cheers. It's chocolatey. Huh, you know, in kind of the fun way, that's pretty fun. It's spicy hot chocolate. Cold spicy hot chocolate with a little back note of beer. All right, pretty cool. I'm gonna drink it. Let's get to it. Last week's winner of a t-shirt was Jim Glass. Jim, if you're out there, get in touch with me. If not, I'll get in touch with you, and you won last week's Travels with Geordie t-shirt. I want to thank a bunch of new patrons. Thank you very much from Patreon. Frederick Nige, Daryl G, Scott Jacks, and Mike Adams. Thank you all so very much for coming aboard. I'm okay with that. Also a new supporter on PayPal. Thanks so much, James Glass. Are you Jim Glass? Well, anyway, James Glass, thanks so much. You may have also won a t-shirt. I don't even know. All right, well, let's just jump right to it. This is really growing on me. All you need now is a word of the week. So if you'd like to win a Travels with Geordie t-shirt, simply use the word I'm about to say down in a comment below, and I'll send you off a Travels with Geordie t-shirt if I pick you at random. The word is satisfying. Satisfying is this week's word of the week because something about getting started this year, getting the soul in, getting geared up, ordering parts and gear and gauges and stuff for the new engine, which is so exciting, is just so satisfying. And so much of it has to do with all of you. Thanks so much. Cheers. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.